Hi, everyone. This is Kyle Welch with RCR Wireless News. Today's webinar will focus on how two industry leaders, Fulcrum Technologies and MDSI Incorporated, have partnered in a fashion to help their communication service provider customers manage the network asset chaos that will happen during the 5G upheaval and transformation. As well, their partnership provides tremendous operational benefits across a variety of areas that will be addressed over the next hour in this webinar. Our presenters today will be Shannon Payne, Vice President of Business Development at MDSI, and Mark Burgoyne, Vice President of Sales at Fulcrum. At this time, I'd now like to hand the presentation over to Mark to start the discussion.
Well, thank you very much, Kyle, and welcome everyone to this webinar. Just a couple of points that I wanted to make real quickly. One is that the title of this is 5G is coming, your assets are on the line. And I just want to point out that there is a T in that word assets, just in case you were wondering. The second thing is, while the focus of this is on 5G, many of the concepts and many of the principles that you hear, whether it be related to asset lifecycle management or supply chain management in general, certainly apply to other industries in wireless or pertain specifically to the 5G build-out. What I want to do is talk about the partnership. It may be a bit odd that you see somebody presenting as co-presenters, but I wanted to explain the partnership that we have between Fulcrum Technologies and MDSI. So in 2014, we worked together on a specific engagement with a large mutual client. We recognized the symbiotic and complementary capability that we could offer to other clients when we were working together. So we formed a strategic partnership in December of 2014. The nature of the partnership is that of a reseller or as a referral of each other into mutual opportunities. The technical nature of the partnership allowed us to do some pre-integration of our respective technology so that we can deliver a true end-to-end solution to our clients. Together, we're addressing the needs of a very large North American cable operator, and we're jointly in discussions with other clients as well. As you'll hear about over the next few minutes, this partnership delivers true end-to-end extended supply chain solutions that move beyond deployment into the world of real-time fulfillment, tracking, offline data collection, and asset lifecycle management of hardware and software assets, leading to true asset assurance and optimized supply chain. By being able to mine data from CATS, which is a Fulcrum Asset Lifecycle Management solution, as well as other data sources, including MDSI's Acuity platform, we can apply analytics and business intelligence to assure asset assurance to address things like the reduction of construction in progress, or SIP, time to value, proper spare levels, reuse versus new, software license management, and warranty management, just to name a few. We truly believe that the partnership between our two companies is a case where the total solution that we can provide our clients is greater than the sum of the parts. Well, while we're working with that, let me just give you kind of a brief overview of Fulcrum and what our value proposition is. So Fulcrum was founded in 1998. In fact, we just celebrated our 19th year anniversary on May the 1st, just a few days ago. We're headquartered in Seattle, Washington, and we have an additional office in India to service our Asia Pacific customers, and that's via a wholly owned subsidiary. The value proposition that Fulcrum provides to our customers is to help them manage high value assets that tend to move a lot over their life cycle and are geographically dispersed, either as part of a network or in multiple warehouses, staging facilities, stocking locations, etc. Fulcrum was a pioneer in providing asset management and asset tracking solutions. We started by giving basic asset tracking capability, which allowed our customers to know what they had, where it was located, and what status it was in. From there, we grew into an asset management and assurance solution by leveraging the basic data to support key business processes, including field audits and cycle counts, spares management, enhanced RMA process, and others. Now we're positioned as a key component of our customer's supply chain, supporting functions like min-max and replenishment, requisitions, and advanced inventory planning. Fulcrum's CATS ALM solution is a powerful application and is often positioned as the physical asset database of record in our clients' environments. Our powerful mobile front-end component allows for quick and effective data collection and decision support, all from use of existing smartphones or tablets. As you can see from the last bullet, which now is up on the slide, on the screen, we've done ALM implementations at over 45 clients, including our most recent client, Airtel in India, who until recently was the second largest service provider in the world. But also we have 3 of the largest communication service providers in North America as our customers. Our partnership with MDSI extends our ability to help our clients optimize their supply chain from initial requisition to eventual retirement and everything in between. This includes reverse logistics and the use and reuse of excess equipment. Melissa, could you advance the slide, please? So just a quick history on 5G. So there's not a day that goes by that you don't get some kind of an email in your inbox about 5G and what's going on in the industry. It certainly is catching the attention of major service providers. Just yesterday, in fact, T-Mobile announced their plans for rolling out 5G services in 2019. Also, AT&T said earlier this year that it had successfully completed tests with Nokia that delivered its streaming video service, DirecTV, now over a 5G connection. And recently, Verizon has said that they expect a commercial launch as early as 2018. Next slide, please, Melissa. So the end user benefits are powerful by going to 5G. A lot of work will be around machine-to-machine interfaces, around the Internet of Things, and around where much higher concentration, much higher bandwidth is required. As it relates to this particular presentation, the need to manage assets as 5G networks get built out is going to be significant. There are going to be new networks that are going to be built. There's going to be existing equipment that's going to be free up to be redeployed in other parts of the network or to be sold. So it's very important that customers that are embarking on 5G delivery have optimized supply chains and effective ALM solutions in place. Melissa, if we could go to the next slide, please. So reading from PR Newswire, the 2016 research report that they did said that LTE and LTE advanced deployments are still underway. However, driven by the regional, national government, mobile operators, and vendor initiatives, they expect that over $6 billion will be spent on 5G R&D and only in trial investments between 2015 and 2020. If I look at a report by EE Times that was sponsored by Qualcomm, they're talking about $200 billion a year building 5G products and services, it's estimated, with the majority of that spend coming in the United States, followed by China, Japan, and Germany. You see some of the things that are going to be built out: fiber connections, base stations, antenna, towers. But again, a lot of the equipment that's being replaced is not obsolete equipment in many parts of the world. In fact, in many parts, as we're seeing with some of our Asia Pacific operations, there are customers that are still now just building out 4G LTE networks. So there's a potential for reuse, for consignment sales, for reverse logistics, excess management, so on and so forth. If we could go to the next slide, please, Melissa. And this is some of what I was just talking about. The impact on 4G assets is that much of that equipment is going to be freed up for reuse and redeployment. So the bottom line, there's going to be lots of equipment churn. There's going to be need for reuse, repair, consignment, etc. And the biggest part of it is having effective supply chain management processes in place, which are focused around asset lifecycle management. Next slide, please, Melissa. So why a big fuss over running an optimized supply chain? Well, because studies have shown that over 50% of a CSP's capital spend each year is on acquiring very expensive network assets. I just gave a few examples that some studies showed about the specific spend that's anticipated on 5G networks. Networks are constantly churning as new technologies and services are deployed. High value assets are constantly moving. Hopefully they're being reused where possible, being redeployed to other parts of the network, and ultimately being disposed of in some manner. So it's imperative that you clearly understand the precise nature, the location, the status, the availability, spares availability of these network assets. So let's move to the next slide, and we'll see that CSPs are not necessarily doing a great job at managing network assets today, and the economic impact by not doing so. In a recent study by Telemanagement Forum, you see the $350 billion global spend on network hardware. In the same study, it was reported that the current accuracy rate of equipment that's being managed by service providers is only at 74%. This means that 26% of an annual spend, or about $91 billion of that spend, quickly becomes unaccounted for. What is even more shocking is that the respondents surveyed reported that an 87% accuracy rate would be acceptable. Even this still results in a $46 billion a year loss. I don't know of any other industry where this level of accuracy would be tolerated. That would be like manufacturing 100 parts, expecting that 13 of them are going to be broke. Because of the lack of visibility on assets, very bad things happen. You tend to overbuy to compensate for the lack of visibility. You buy new when you may have excess available to use but are not aware of it. You pay taxes on assets that may not even be in service anymore or may be in the wrong jurisdiction. Generally, when lacking visibility, one errs on the side of caution and overbuys. Next slide, please. So here you see a very brief summary of supply chain drivers that CSPs are faced with. Basic tracking of your network assets, carrying too high sparing levels, paying too much tax, the need to reduce the construction in progress or SIP. And again, over 50% of a CSP's annual spend is invested in acquiring expensive network assets that are strength of the CSP offerings. And there's tremendous waste in this industry. As 5G comes on, without proper procedures in place to manage these assets more effectively, these numbers are only going to continue to go up. Next slide, please. At the business level, executives are faced with the need to reduce capital expenditures. However, the reality is that network spending continues to grow, much of it due to poor asset management and visibility into what a carrier may already have. This brings in the need for asset assurance. The relationship that we're talking about today allows you to address the key pain points of use and reuse, including excess management, reduction of spare levels, reduction of SIP, and the move to just-in-time inventory. Just-in-time inventory has been available in the manufacturing world for many years now. Why not bring those same principles to communication service providers and to the supply chains that they're involved with? A systematic approach to ALM is mandatory to address these and other challenges that our clients are faced with. Next slide, please. So when I talk about supply chain, what is it and how does it apply to communication service providers? Here's a definition from APICS, the American Production Inventory Control Society, that says that a supply chain is a system of organizations, people, technologies, activities, information, and resources involved in moving materials, products, and services all the way through the manufacturing process. I'm not going to read the rest of it. We can make this slide available to you, but you can see that. And again, a lot of the supply chain concepts started in manufacturing. But if we can go to the next slide, we'll see how that applies to communication service providers. In this case, the product is the network build-out and the maintenance of the network. That is where the supply chain with forward logistics and reverse logistics and asset assurance and asset lifecycle management need to apply. ALM addresses all of the points that you see in the slide and is a basic fundamental for effective and optimized supply chain for CSPs. By having MDSI in partnership with us address the challenges of many of the supply chain management areas, and with the tight integration of their systems and Fulcrum's CAT solution, we can provide CSPs the absolute most optimized supply chain management experience. To elaborate a bit on some of these points and talk about how MDSI can add value, I turn the microphone over to Shannon Payne, Vice President of Business Development for MDSI.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. Actually, Mark, I think you had some examples here. I didn't know if you wanted to talk through those.
Yeah, you're right, Shannon. I'm sorry. We do have some examples, and I'm not going to take the audience through all of these because we can make the recording available and the slide deck available. But the point is, these are real examples of several of the 45 customers that we've engaged with. And you can see that even with older technology, less expensive technology, the savings are substantial. In one case, we had $100 million saved just by reducing the amount of spares needed to maintain the network. In another case, down at the bottom, we were able to work with one customer, a rather small customer, to save over $5 million annually just through paying proper taxes. And this is property taxes against equipment that they were able to identify as inventory versus deployed assets. You see a couple other examples, $60 million second from the top in operational asset savings, because again, reduction in spares and the savings in the first year alone was $60 million. So I think Shannon has some other examples of some cost savings and some benefits that they've been able to see with some of their customers. And again, together, the power of the relationship between Fulcrum and MDSI even expand further in this area. So now with that, Shannon, I'll turn it to you.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate it. Really, one of the things that we've found is the primary concern from a majority of our customers has really been the lack of visibility of assets up and down the supply chain. And that can range from stranded assets from new capital project deployments, decommissioned assets that are sitting in closets, under desks, in the corners of warehouses, or just the lack of visibility of spares across the organizational footprint. And MDSI is really focused on this key problem statement from the customers in regards to visibility in the development of our solution offering. If you could advance, Brian. So MDSI we call ourselves a hybrid VAR. We started off in 1990 as a traditional network hardware reseller. And in the late 90s, we really kind of changed our focus really around delivering creative cost avoidance solutions to help customers maximize their technology investment. At the end of the 90s and the .com era, everybody that was building up infrastructure felt that if one router was good, 10 routers had to be great. So they were buying equipment, and we noticed in working with them that a lot of times they're buying equipment that they already owned. They didn't have visibility to this capital equipment once it reached their facilities, and there wasn't really any advocacy for existing inventory. So we really started changing our focus to marry technical prowess with good supply chain disciplines, focusing on asset management. And from that, MDSI developed our Acuity application to really streamline the reverse logistics process and focus on utilizing that to provide ultimately a lower cost supply solution to our customers. You want to advance? So in talking about supply chain, a lot of the concepts that we're going to go through are really interrelated into different parts of the supply chain. So we'll definitely touch on a few of them in multiple areas. But when it comes to the demand planning, this is something that I think every organization would feel that they could do a better job at getting a better demand structure for upcoming capital projects. The ideal situation or scenario is really to have engineering and operations provide the project or sales forecast of upcoming activity and really align that with the sourcing group based upon true actual timelines of implementation. But a lot of times organizations have pressures to achieve either various capital spend numbers on a quarterly or annual basis, so the use it or lose it mentality. And thus a lot of times capital purchases are made on approval of a project. So sometimes that can be way too early in the process. Sometimes it can be too late due to lead times from manufacturers. So one of the things that we found in working with our customers is it's imperative to effectively manage the assets really in association with firmed install dates in order to reduce overspending, overpurchasing, and the potential for stranded assets. So one of the things that we have implemented with our customers is, we try to tightly integrate with engineering planning tools. We've worked with the engineering groups of organizations to allow them to be able to lay out their project plans and their engineering BOMs well in advance for all of the install locations that may be associated with the capital project. And this really allows everyone to have that forecasted demand and aggregate that demand to work with sourcing to really look for what's that lowest cost procurement, but also to tie it truly as close as possible with the firm dates for the capital deployments. If we move forward. So then moving on to procurement and sourcing, most organizations are dealing with the same issues. There's tightening of capital budgets. Companies, the old cliche, everybody's having to do more with less. And so companies are really looking for ways, especially upcoming, to free up capital for investment in new initiatives, be it 5G technologies, software-defined networks, data center migrations. So they have to look for creative ways to manage capacity of existing networks, support the existing networks, even grow existing infrastructure in certain areas. So some of the problems that they face is a lot of times the sourcing groups have no visibility into existing inventory. Even the technicians, engineers, we joke and we call it redeploying equipment by the go fish methodology. People will call their buddies down the road. Do you have any of these in excess that we could use? There's no streamlined process to incorporate that into the sourcing or procurement function. So what we've done is really made all of that part of one streamlined process. Typically, if you force procurement or folks to create separate requisitions or to have two processes to look for existing equipment as well as new, people are going to choose the path of least resistance and will just cut a requisition to purchase new equipment. So in the Acuity application, one of the things we do is we take that demand and then we have automatic consumption logic or consumption rules that we work with both engineering as well as supply chain on in order to define how equipment should be consumed. So we may automatically use redeployable equipment first, then look at other options before finally resting on procurement of new equipment, all to be aggregated and bundled for the capital project deployment. And so we found great cost avoidance in that area just by giving visibility and a streamlined process to making sure that redeployable equipment is used and used in an efficient manner. We had one customer that over a 5-year period was able to redeploy about $45 million worth of equipment in based upon their purchase price there. One other element from a procurement and sourcing perspective that we found is that many organizations don't take advantage of certified equipment from the OEM. So one of the elements we've done is incorporated that such that once the BOMs are generated, we can allocate existing equipment that's owned for redeployment, and then we look to see if there are certified equipment options. And really what we've found is that typically about 10 to 20% of a lot of the capital projects, the equipment is available via some kind of certified reconditioned equipment from the OEM. And that typically can yield about a 10 to 20% savings based upon their new purchase price for that equipment, which is ideal for supporting legacy networks, maximizing the dollars there such that the saved capital can be spent on new initiatives. An example, one company last year had a $37 million spend from total capital, and they were able to save about $2.7 million using certified reconditioned equipment. If you want to proceed, Brian. Then moving into warehouse management, tying into the visibility structure, one of the key elements that one of our customers mentioned to us is, hey, I have $3.5 billion in spend for capital projects this next year. Once the equipment hits my dock, I have no visibility to that equipment through to deployment. And that's really because typically capital equipment's purchased on a PO, it's received, it hits the capital project, it's not an inventory. There's no tracking mechanism for that equipment within the warehouse. So some of the initiatives to do is that we've implemented is really to provide tracking of all capital equipment that is quote unquote in inventory, providing traceability all the way through to the deployment and implementation of the project. And so the great thing about that is by tracking that capital equipment, there always seem to be hiccups, delays, project cancellations, changes, re-engineering, re-architecturing. And so we provide for an easy reallocation of equipment from project to project, and basically with an IOU back to the project that may have been borrowed from, thus taking advantage of existing equipment versus buying new equipment specifically to a new project to maximize the use of existing equipment and at least defer the outlay of liquid capital in purchasing that equipment. We actually performed an audit for one of our customers at one of their facilities and found that they had $27 million in inventory that they had purchased. Project was placed on hold. They re-architected the solution, but no one was actively looking at ways to repurpose that equipment. And so in these cases, we typically will reclassify equipment to what we call a common stock bucket that will then be automatically used in consumption when new projects are being initiated for deployment to make sure that that capital gets utilized. We move forward. And then finally, from an order fulfillment perspective, most organizations really face the same issues in this space. We have lead time issues from manufacturers. Engineers receive equipment piecemeal from multiple suppliers. And a lot of times, because it's not in inventory, it's not efficiently managed by local deployment warehouses. Parts can get borrowed for other projects, misplaced, and ultimately deal with stranded assets. And there's really no traceability of this equipment all the way to in-service. And that's one of the key elements that we looked for in our partnership with Fulcrum. That was the key driver in implementing the CAT solution. And we developed an integration such that as the equipment was deployed to the field, we could show that equipment in transit. And then that way the engineers in the field could then scan that equipment and show that it was received and installed and placed in service. And management really appreciated the governance of that. So now they could actually have a chain of custody fully through procurement inception all the way through to deployment at the backside and show assets in their true location where they were installed. Move forward. And then one of the key areas of optimization around logistics is typically surrounding the reverse logistics side. We work with engineers and have built a set of receiving rules or triage logic in our model that really allows effective routing of equipment to the appropriate disposition based upon its next intended use. So one of the key elements for not only keeping track and having visibility of assets is making sure that you're getting the greatest utilization from those assets. So we will route with a one-touch or one-scan methodology for items. Should they go into redeploy? Does this part need to go into sparing? Is this a trade-in part? Does it need to be resold or disposed of? And so can set different stocking levels within each of those dispositions with overflow to make sure that we're really routing assets that may be coming back from the field into the most effective utilization bucket. And then finally, one of the key areas that we find our customers have issues is surrounding spares management. Many times when organizations keep spares at their facilities, they don't have tools for visibility. People are keeping track of spares on spreadsheets. Technicians can pull spares for installs, not record it, not let anyone know. So now spares are missing. A lot of times organizations are really paying a lot of money for maintenance contract, OEM maintenance contracts on legacy or end-of-life equipment. So really we try to focus with our customers and organizations on maximizing spares, maximizing visibility to that, such that they have the right size spares amount based upon their install base. And then finally, the effective management in spares surrounding defective returns. Let's face it, technicians historically hate doing paperwork. They like to deal with the outage, get the systems back up and running, but then dealing with any paperwork on the back end is not their forte. So we try to develop solutions that streamline and make it an efficient and effective process for the entitlement management to occur. If parts are under maintenance, if they need to be repaired, making sure we get those parts routed appropriately to the correct location for the correct disposition. And surrounding that, it's really important to have holistic visibility. And this is one of the elements that our implementations of the CAT solution have provided us. In working with one customer, we found that one region was paying monthly for repairs of a certain product line, spending about $1 million annually in OpEx having these repairs done. We went to another region, identified all the assets that they had in that region. Turns out they have an abundance of surplus of this particular part. So just by having a holistic visibility to the asset information, we're able to reduce that $1 million in OpEx, just having visibility across the board. If we progress on. And so in assisting customers, MDSI has really taken a three-prong approach in helping customers with their sparing solution. And, first off, providing visibility to the spares and the locations. And customers have asked us really for multiple different SLAs in regards to spares. Distribution center spares, where a next business day or next flight out SLA is adequate. Using strategic stocking locations to where spares can be in market to support multiple locations, ideal for CPE type situations to where parts can be couriered or rushed out to meet technicians. And then finally, the request is customers want to have a critical spares type solution. They want to have spares on site at their facilities, but managed and the supply chain managed externally, such that when a part is consumed, it's automatically replenished and there's tracking of that defective part back through either to the manufacturer or to repair disposition. So the glue that ties all this together really is having a business intelligence overlay in order to make the right decisions at the right time. Combining consumption analytics, lead time analytics from vendors, install-based data, failure information, really all drive to having appropriate governance in regards to activities that are occurring, and really lead to making the efficient decisions to drive capital cost out of the model. We proceed. So MDSI, in working with Fulcrum, has actually built some business intelligence overlays that combine both elements of our solution, from the distribution center and the back-end management of equipment all the way through to the deployment in the field. And we've worked to create actionable dashboards for our customers such that they can look and identify, really any areas that are of concern and need to be addressed. They can drill in, they can go and take that information and create actions, such as tracking assets that have been deployed to the field where the technician has not installed them in over 2 weeks or hasn't updated asset records. Making sure that we're identifying areas of spare shortages. Where do we have excess equipment that can be harvested and brought back from the field? So really tying these elements in ultimately leads to greater efficiency in the process and ultimately the goal of capital cost avoidance. And as Mark mentioned before, some real world examples. Definitely, from a redeployment perspective, have had some great success in harvesting from multiple distributed facilities, bringing equipment in, centralizing it, providing visibility for redeployment, reuse, sparing, any ways that we can squeeze every ounce of economic utility out of existing assets, as well as reduction in OpEx surrounding spares management. And some of the keys that we mentioned before is really leveraging the OEM certified equipment. Typically, that is a line that's not necessarily evangelized by the manufacturers. They typically are focusing on new product sales. And so, definitely with other areas and other resellers, we try to build it in tightly with the program to make sure it's just one seamless step in trying to find the lowest cost solution for deployment. All right, and wrapping up, there's really no one-size-fits-all solution. Our partnership between MDSI and Fulcrum really provides services, software solutions that are tailored to each company's individual business processes. The goal is to give visibility, insight, and control of these high-value assets. So we definitely would look forward to strategizing with you to find the best solutions that could potentially fit your needs in the future. And our contact information is listed there. And with that, I will turn things back over to Kyle to handle any discussion items.
All right, thanks, Shannon. Great presentation. We have a few questions, and I definitely encourage anyone in the audience, please submit your questions, and we should be able to get to them. All right, so the first question we got is, we have someone that currently manages their own inventory. Why would they consider outsourcing that to a company like MDSI?
Great question. So one of the things that I like to tell people is, this is our lifeblood. This is what we focus on. We build out best practices surrounding asset management and capital cost avoidance. And so, we definitely have a proven track record in regards to the services we've been able to deliver to our customers. And a lot of times we really work in a complementary means to the existing supply chain group. So it's not necessarily a full outsource. A lot of times we look for areas or portions, specific functions that it may make sense for us to assist with, or for certain parts of the network, the core, transport, any of those particular elements where it makes sense. So, as we said, just to create that nice tailored solution and really leverage the experience that we've had and the benefits surrounding creative cost avoidance solutions.
Okay, thanks. The next question possibly may be directed towards Mark, but Shannon, feel free to jump in. So we have someone with an ERP solution that is already keeping track of their network assets. Why would they need an ALM solution like the one you guys described in today's webinar?
Yeah, thank you, Kyle. That's a question that we get a lot, and that's an excellent question. The term inventory is used by customers in several different fashions. They might be referring to the inventory from a financial standpoint, which is typically what's tracked in an ERP solution. They may be talking about inventory from a provisioning and activation standpoint. What we're looking at is the physical database of record for the asset and the movement of those assets from different statuses, from being in a warehouse to being installed to going back to a repair vendor for the RMA process, et cetera. And our solution through, easy to use mobility applications on smartphones allows for the tracking of that asset as it goes through the different movement over its life cycle and to keep track of the different status. So oftentimes we interface with other systems in our customers' back office, and in every occasion, we've integrated with ERP systems where we provide the tracking of the asset, the movement of the asset, the status of the asset, but we reconcile back with the ERP solution for the financial database of record. So it's not one or the other. Typically what we see is that the CAT solution is a physical asset database of record where we're tracking the movement and the life cycle of that asset, but we're reconciling that information back with the financial records that typically exist in ERP solutions.
All right, great. Thank you. We've got another question that just came in. So, how can one's assets that are already deployed at various sites be tracked?
So I'll take a first pass at that, Shannon, and you can maybe try to add from your perspective. One way is through some kind of electronic polling, assuming that the assets are intelligent and that they report through some kind of an EMS system or NMS system. So if the assets are able to report on their status, assuming they're tethered or installed, of course, then we can pick up that information through the NMS system that's managing and aware of those assets, and we can feed that information and reconcile that information against the CATS database of record. If it's an asset that's non-intelligent, or if it's not installed but sitting in a spare status somewhere, then typically best practices that we see would be to capture that asset information the next time it moves, the next time the field tech goes out to do an audit, the next time an asset gets moved from one location to another. Go ahead and put a barcode label on it. Scan it one time, capture the information of that asset, and now you've just populated all of that information for all the downstream use. So what we like to say is discover when you can, and then manually tag and track from that point forward those assets that are either not deployed or installed as part of the network, or that are unintelligent and not able to report on their own capability.
And Shannon, I don't know if you had anything to add on that. Methods to track assets that are already deployed at various sites.
Yes, well, and that's actually an area that we get engaged in quite frequently for multiple customers to either, if they have existing asset structure in place, to go and perform audits. But we've been asked to do quite a bit of discovery, both for tethered and untethered assets, either at cell sites, at switch locations, data centers, POPs. And so we typically have trained teams that will go out and we'll take some of that electronic information, anything we can get from a polling structure, do validation. A lot of times organizations run into issues to where you may have a reconciliation or an ETL that needs to be performed between the polling data that is received and the asset management register. So there may be some disparity between the part number that is identified one place over the other. So we definitely have we get asked quite frequently to go and assist with that function, that effort.
All right, thank you for the follow-up. So the next question we had, so someone that already uses an OSS system to manage their inventory, what benefits can they expect from an ALM solution?
So I'll take the first pass at that. Again, inventory is a word that gets used quite a lot in this industry, and it has many different meanings. In this case, for an OSS system, something like a Metasolv or a Granite or a Kramer Systems or something like that, typically when people are talking about inventory, they might even be talking about logical inventory, where they're talking about bandwidths or circuits, or even when they are talking about physical inventory, they're talking about needing to know about the assets from a standpoint of being able to provision services, turn up services, and assure services. So it's a very different standpoint of looking at inventory. In that case, the inventory that they're talking about is by definition installed, maybe not active yet, but installed and ready for services to be deployed against it, and doesn't consider the movement of that asset as it goes back to RMA process or as it goes through its reverse logistics, so on and so forth, nor does it consider those assets that aren't installed as part of the network. It's hard to really do much on an asset that's in a box in a closet at a spare location. However, it's very important to keep up with that and know that those assets exist and where they're located. So that's the difference between what we do against inventory. We're looking at the tracking, the movement of the asset. We're looking at it over its entire life cycle. And we've developed some very powerful and easy to use tools that allow the field technicians and the warehouse personnel to track that asset, as opposed to the OSS system, which is looking at it from a provisioning and activation and service assurance standpoint.
All right, thanks, Mark. The next question I think would probably start with Shannon. So earlier in the presentation, you referred to helping your customers reduce their CIP. Can you please give a few examples of how you would do this?
Yeah, definitely. And we've had a number of different instances in that most organizations have different rules in regards to what's defined as CIP, when do they trigger and move that into service and start depreciating. But one of the key elements that we found is really working with customers to separate the kind of the planning and engineering function with implementation. And first off, wherever possible, try to work off of a firm date. So identify demand up front to where people can build out their project schedules as they know them, and then really using a firm date as a triggering for ensuring that supply is set and ready to go. That's easier said than done, but that's one of the nicer solutions. And then the other is really around making sure that we're keeping visibility to those individual project assets and keeping in sync with what's going on within the engineering organization, such that at the first possible moment when we know there's going to be a shift or a slide in project scheduling and or a project cancellation, that we immediately look to see where can assets be reallocated for effective use. One of the things that we found is that some of the biggest SIP issues are really due to project delay. People will get a capital project approved. The moment they get it approved, they'll cut the requisition, they'll buy all the equipment, but they really, the project might get pushed out quarter to quarter, month to month. And so that leads to a greatly increased SIP aging. So those are a couple of the key elements that we work with customers on.
Okay, great, thanks. Next question. So for someone that's not looking for a large system to install and have to manage, does the solution offer a software as a service model?
Yeah, so this is Mark talking. Actually, the large customer that I referred to during my part of the presentation, where we and MDSI are working together, is definitely in a cloud-based software as a service model. So yes, from a standard product standpoint, when we implement CATS, our ALM tool, we can deliver that behind the customer's firewall, or we can deliver that through a hosted model. Shannon, you want to talk about Acuity?
Yes, Acuity is hosted as well, and so it really is. It has different elements to it, but it is a software as a service solution that allows for customers to interface. Some elements are a portal into the services that we provide, and then some elements are basically a field-based solution utilized by our customers. But definitely, it's really strictly a SaaS solution from MDSI's perspective.
Okay, thanks, both of you guys. All right, so it looks like we have time for just one more question. So, the act of performing audits and manually tagging of assets, it does seem to involve quite a bit of labor-intensive work, and it's a very manual process, as well as involving field services and work that really some smaller companies and budgets just can't take on. So with this, is there something that MDSI and or Fulcrum can do to perform as a service to help make it easier and more cost efficient for these companies?
Yes, so we talked about this a little bit before, but MDSI does provide field services for those cases where the customer needs somebody to come out and they don't want to use their resources. They can employ MDSI resources to do field services work. But again, what we try to do as much as possible is implement technology to be able to discover as much of the electronic discovery of the network as possible. And in fact, I mentioned Airtel as a very, very large customer where we are doing electronic discovery, both for the first time feed of data into our asset lifecycle management solution, as well as to reconcile that data on an ongoing basis to make sure the data integrity is kept high. So we discover where we can, we leverage technology, and then we leverage best practices. So not every asset has to be tagged. If it's not a high value asset, if it doesn't move a lot, then don't worry about it. However, some of the higher value assets that are moving quite a lot over their life cycle, even there are some best practices that say you don't need to go out necessarily and do the field services work against every asset day one. You can wait until the next time an audit's performed. You can wait until the next time a cycle count is performed. You can wait until that asset has to go back to a vendor for repair or leaves a field technician's truck to go in service. So we like to sit down when we're talking strategy with our prospects and talk about what is it that you're looking to track. We've done 45 of these implementations. Let's work with you and make sure we understand what your business drivers are. And then let's leverage technology and best practices, and then, leverage field services to go out and do the work that a partner like MDSI does a great job at providing.
That's great, Mark. And Shannon, did you have anything else to add on closing comments there?
No, I agree with Mark. I mean, we try to take a practical approach just because obviously anytime you do have service elements, there's a cost component to that. So really in planning, when we are going out to perform that work, we do the same. So try to do a reconciliation versus a true physical discovery where possible. Any information we can get up front before going on site. And then, again, identifying the criticality of the asset. It doesn't make sense to try to go out and catch, asset information on every optic, every SFP, every little element. So really identifying what those rules are and implementing that in a practical manner.
All right, great. Thank you. That's about all the time we have for today's webinar. I want to thank everyone for attending. 5G is coming. Your assets are on the line. Again, our presenters today were Shannon Payne, Vice President of Business Development at MDSI, and Mark Burgoyne, Vice President of Sales at Fulcrum. Thank you to Mark and Shannon.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.